Hi, I'm Justine.
And I'm Olivia.
And welcome back to the A16Z podcast. Today, we're going to be discussing the Consumer AI Top 100 list. So, Olivia, let's start because you are compiling the list and you've been doing this for a while. What is this list and kind of what's the purpose of it?
So this is our 5th time doing this list. We do it every 6 months. We started at basically the dawn of the consumer Gen AI era. And the purpose is just to get a sense of what real consumers are actually using in AI. So we, as a sample set, we take every website and every mobile app in the entire world.
Wow.
And we sort them in descending order of usage. So for websites, this is monthly visits globally. For mobile apps, this is monthly active users. We use SimilarWeb and Sensor Tower as these 2 data sources. And then we grab the top 50 from each of those sources that are AI native companies. So you'll notice that this captures usage, not revenue. Mm-hmm. So it's not paid usage only. It's all usage, even people who are using the products for free, which to me gives an even better and I think kind of more real sense of what is capturing consumer imagination in AI.
Totally. Yeah. I feel like a common question we often get as folks who are consumer investors in AI is like, what are people doing on AI besides ChatGPT?
What should I be doing?
That too, yeah. And so I feel like these lists are a really helpful way for folks to get a sense of like, what are some of the use cases? What are some of the properties that are getting really big, getting a lot of users that you might not know about? And for a lot of people, sort of an inspiration list of what they want to try out. Let's talk about the new companies on the list, because that's always exciting of like who cracks into the top 50 for web and the top 50 for mobile who weren't in the list before.
Yeah.
How would you describe the new companies? Were there any major changes?
Yeah. The web list, I think, is the best way to track changes over time. The mobile list is a little bit less stable just because the app stores are constantly updating their policies on what's allowed. For our first couple mobile lists, it was just a wave of companies that were direct copycats of ChatGPT.
I remember that era, yes.
And all the companies were like ChatGTP or Chat and Ask AI.
ChatGPT was a big one.
Exactly.
Yes.
And so those were dominating the mobile list. So this time we had a lot of new companies on mobile as iOS ecosystem has cracked down on that. But on the web list, we still did have 11 new names. Sounds like a lot out of 50, but it's actually a big reduction from, I think it was 17 new names 6 months ago.
Wow.
Which to me reflects the fact that the ecosystem is starting to stabilize a little bit more. There were still a couple of really exciting trends that popped out on this list that I would expect might continue and yield more new names. Vibecoding was one of them, which I think kind of burst into the forefront at the end of last year. Yeah. So we saw it a little bit on our prior list in March, but it really kind of came into the forefront now. So we have Bolt on our Brink list, just below the top 50 cutoff.
Awesome.
And then we have both Lovable and Replit on the web list.
In the past, a lot of the names on the list have been kind of in one of two categories, which is like general chat and companionship or creative tools, which I love. I spend a bunch of time in both of those categories, but it sounds like we're starting to see things like Vibecoding that are sort of outside of those two, what were really the killer use cases of consumer AI for a long time.
We definitely are. More in productivity as well, which we'll talk about. I will say companionship continues to just dominate.
Yeah.
We actually did have 3 new companionship names. So Juicy Chat, Joy, and Our Dream all made the list, alongside a bunch of others that have made the list before. So Character was the biggest name, Janitor, Spicy Chat, Polybuzz, Crush On, ADOT, and Candy AI were all on this list and in the past. So that's a pretty notable section of the list that I think is dominated by companionship names, which is pretty interesting.
For sure. And there's also a lot of big companies that have products on the list, folks like Google. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that because I think that's been a surprise.
Yeah, Google had a big 6 months, and I would say especially their models and even their consumer-facing products had a really big 6 months. The way they structured their domains in the past made it hard for us to include Google products on the list since we needed to be able to independently rank their traffic. So now we finally were able to for the first time, and 4 unique Google properties made the web list.
Wow.
So Gemini was number 2. It was right behind ChatGPT. It has just about 10% of ChatGPT's traffic on web, but it's much closer on mobile. It's like half of ChatGPT's traffic on the mobile app, which is interesting. It's mostly Android users, which I think you would expect. The other big debut for Google was a little more surprising to me. It's actually AI Studio, which is Google's developer-facing sandbox. So that's where engineers go when they want to build things and test out Google models. labs.
Yep.
So that hit in the top 10 as well. And then right below the top 10 was Notebook LM at
Wow.
number 13. And I take your wow as a little bit of a surprise, which was a surprise to me too. And I think a bit of a narrative violation that they went viral almost a year ago
Yeah.
in September of 2024. But they've actually kept up their traffic every month of flat or increasing traffic, with the exception of this last month of summer when I think a lot of the academic usage caused it to decline, but just barely.
Right.
And then one of your favorites also made the list, which was Google Labs, down at number 39.
Cool.
This is kind of the consumer-facing sandbox for
Yep.
Google models, whereas AI Studio is the developer-facing sandbox. Google Labs includes VO3, the amazing new video model that you yourself have probably driven a big portion of the usage
I've
for.
spent a lot of money on VO3.
Yeah, exactly.
And driven many visits for
Yes.
sure.
And actually, Google Labs includes a bunch of other products like Doppel, which is their kind of outfit try-on product.
Yes.
It includes Portrait, which is coaching. It includes
Whisk, right?
Whisk.
The image generation kind of sandbox, which is very cool and fun to play with.
Exactly. Project Mariner, which is their agentic kind of browser sandbox.
Interesting.
But my hunch is it's largely VO3 because traffic to that, to the Google Labs spiked 15% in the month that VO3 was released, which was really exciting.
Let's talk about the Chinese AI companies. So both new startups coming out of China, also big Chinese companies releasing models or consumer-facing properties. How are these ranking on the list, and what do you think has driven their growth?
I mean, you could argue that Chinese companies show up in 2 or even 3 pretty interesting ways on the list. I would say the first one are companies that are, or AI products that are built for China and used in China.
Yep.
And you might say, why? And it's because a lot of non-Chinese AI products like ChatGPT and Claude are banned in China because they have to follow specific regulations and policies and data capture rules that they're not wanting to or able to do if they're going to operate in China.
Yeah.
So China doesn't have a lot of those products that we have, but they have their own.
Yeah.
So a couple companies that made the list are Quark, which is Alibaba's AI assistant on both web and mobile. Daobao, which is ByteDance's AI assistant, also on both web and mobile. And then Kimi, which is another general AI assistant from Moonshot AI. Each of those ranks, actually all of them in the top 20 on web.
Wow.
And the majority usage in China, which I think reflects the fact that like China is the biggest country in the world by population. So even if they're only used one place, they're getting a lot of usage.
And they don't have as much competition from the American general chat assistants that can't be in the country.
Yes, like the ChatGPTs of the world.
Right.
The second category of Chinese companies we're seeing are startups that are developed in or around China, but are built for the rest of the world. And you can't actually even use them in China in many cases. So these are products like DeepSeek or the video models like Hailuo and Kling. Or products like CArt for images. I would say the concentration of these is especially strong in image and video, which is a space that you know well.
Yeah, I think image and video, we've seen a lot of great video models from China, particularly when it comes to animating from a single frame from an image. ByteDance has also been doing a lot more around things like Cdance, which is a really great video model they released that actually outscores VO3 on some of the arenas. One of the really interesting things that I know we can't disentangle in this data, but I think a lot of Chinese companies have taken the strategy in the US of distributing their models through US properties. So there's companies like Krea or Hydra that host various models and have subscriptions where you can access a bunch of the Chinese models at once, whether it's the closed ones like Kling or Minimax, or some of the open source ones like Wan or Quen, which a lot of people are using and really liking. Some of them will also have their own consumer-facing properties. Others will distribute through either the application layer or honestly through folks like Fall and Replicate, more of the developer-facing platforms, where you can do one-off runs or you can kind of have an API to use them in your application.
That is probably yet another way that Chinese companies are showing up in the list in a way, as you said, that's not measurable right now. But the last trend that we were seeing with Chinese companies was products that are developed in China and used both in China and abroad. So Manus is a great example. They just announced a 90 million annualized run rate. And if you look at their traffic, it's number 1 Brazil, number 2 US, and
Brazil
number 3 China.
surprises me.
Yes, a lot of AI traffic comes from Brazil. More free traffic than paid traffic.
I was going to say yes.
But a lot of traffic. So we're seeing both kind of like this domestic AI ecosystem in China start to mature.
Yep.
I think for the very first time on this version of the list.
Right.
And then we're seeing the same thing we've seen on other versions of the list, which is Chinese companies exporting their AI products abroad.
And then to talk about another big trend, which you touched on earlier, vibe coding. We're probably all seeing the tweets from various vibe coding companies that are like, we went 0 to 100 million or even more in ARR in a really short period of time. They have millions of users, kind of faster growth than I think we've seen in many other categories in a very long time. I'm curious, how did you see that kind of reflected on the list, and how did that change since the last edition?
Yeah, so 6 months ago, it was just Bolt on the list. Now Bolt actually is on the Brink list, and Lovable and Replit both made it onto the main list. To me, I was particularly interested to look at not just traffic for these, but also revenue and retention. So Lovable recently announced $100 million in ARR. But it's always easy to say, especially for consumer properties, like, yeah, a lot of people are maybe signing up for a trial, but they're canceling, they're not going to stay on, retention is low. We actually also, for the vibe coding products, looked at revenue retention across another data provider, Consumer Edge. So that looks at a cohort of everyone who signs up in month 0. How much are they paying and what % are still paying in month 1, month 2, month 3? Right. And we put some of this in the report, but what we found for many of the leading vibe coding platforms is they actually see 100% or above revenue retention in the first 3 months, and then maybe flatten out a bit below 100%.
Which, as a point of comparison, is very strong.
Extremely
for what we
striking,
see
yes.
I mean, it's very rare to see any sort of, especially consumer, prosumer, might suggest that there's some enterprise usage happening there with prototyping and stuff within companies.
Enterprise usage, or even just solo vibe coders, people building projects who do get a low-cost plan to try it out, and then find themselves actually publishing and using something, and buying more credits and upgrading to the next plan, which is exciting. It's interesting, though, on that point, for both Lovable and Replit, we can independently see traffic to the sites where you vibe code things. So that's where, like, you or I would go.
They're hosted on like lovable.app.
Yeah, so you can see traffic for everything people are making with Lovable and Replit, and then separately traffic to Lovable and Replit, which are the people making things. And in both cases, the people making things traffic is much higher than the traffic to the things that they're making.
Yes.
Which suggests one of two things. One, it could be that people who are making serious high traffic websites are buying domains for them.
A custom domain, so they no longer pop up under the Lovable or the Replit domain in this data.
So their traffic would not get included.
Yeah.
Or it could be the case that people are building almost personal software for themselves with these vibe coding platforms.
Yeah.
So they might publish them and not get a lot of hits, but they're extremely valuable to the individual user or maybe the user's family and friends.
And I'm curious, have we seen anything yet in vibe coding coming to mobile? Like, are there...
Not yet.
Interesting.
There's a couple companies, startups that we've seen,
Right.
but none of them ranked high enough to get a spot on this list this time.
Yeah, it will be super interesting to see the next edition
Maybe
of the
for the
list.
next edition,
like,
for
if
sure.
any of those start popping up in the top 50. It's hard to displace the companionship and the AI girlfriend ones for sure.
Yes.
But maybe a vibe coding one can do it.
Yes. No, it's actually a good point, because we did, on the point of displacement, for the first time we ranked what I'm calling our AI all-stars.
Cool.
So this is across 5 lists. What are the companies that have made the list every single time?
Amazing.
Which is hard to do because this dates back, 2 years now.
So there's 14 of these companies.
So we have ChatGPT, not a surprise, Perplexity, and Poe all made the list in what I call kind of general LLM assistants.
Right.
Then we have Character AI and Companionship.
Yeah.
They've made it on both web and mobile.
We've got Midjourney, Photoroom, Leonardo Cutout Pro, Veed, and 11 Labs.
In creative tools, we have Quillbot and Gamma in productivity, and then we have Hugging Face and Civet AI in model hosting.
And so those have made the web list for every single one?
Web list for every single, all 5 of the versions we've done of this now.
Amazing.
It was funny looking back at the very first list, because I think we had this question of, is it only going to be companies that invest tens of millions of dollars into proprietary models
Right.
that are able to hold consumer attention?
Yeah.
But now when we look at these 11 all-stars, more than half of them are actually hosting or using other people's models or are model aggregators.
Right.
And so I think that speaks to the fact that in consumer AI, the UI and the product experience matters just as much as the model, especially when so many amazing models are now API available or open source.
If you think of some of those properties too, some of them have built really deep and interesting workflows around creating content, even if they don't have their own model.
Yeah.
Some of them are also starting to see what I would say are sort of the first kind of non-data network effects in AI, especially things like Hugging Face and Civet AI, where, you have these communities where people are hosting tons of models or LoRa's or data sets. They're commenting on them, they're ranking them, they're spitting up mini apps that you can only access on that website. So it's pretty cool to see both of those kind of make the list over and over again and show that you can maybe have network effects in AI.
Yeah, I think you could argue too 11 Labs is the same, where people can publish their voices on 11 for other people to use.
The voice libraries, I hear that all the time from people that one of the reasons they love using 11 is there's thousands and thousands of voices you can choose from, and that's because so many folks have uploaded voices to the voice library.
You could even argue the same is true for a ChatGPT or a Midjourney, where the more user data they get, the better models they can train, which then makes the product better and attracts more users, and it's a whole virtuous cycle.
Yeah, I think that is the natural assumed network effect for AI, which is kind of more users, more data, more feedback, better models. But I know a lot of folks are wondering, like, are there, like, where are the network effects beyond that? Which is why I was particularly interested in, like, the Hugging Faces, Civet AIs of the world, things like the 11 voice library.
Yeah, we're even starting to see in some cases, Gamma is a good example of this on the list. 11 is another good example. Same with Photo Room. These consumer AI properties are almost graduating to enterprise usage with things like team plans, templating, design libraries, and then it becomes something that can spread organically through a team and that a whole organization can benefit from. And the more you invest into building out, say, your templated slide deck on Gamma, the harder it is to kind of churn and move on over to another platform. So
yeah, I think that's one thing that a lot of people didn't expect with a lot of these, especially creative tools or productivity tools that I try to tell founders all the time is like, there's so many AI enthusiasts now. Some are tourists, but some have real use cases. And often with companies like 11, we will see, one individual signs up. They try it out, they see if they like it or not, and then that individual actually becomes like their own self-serve enterprise sale. Like they bring it into their company, they make the case for it, and then it's so easy and then they go to the business and they're like, hey, we actually have 10 or 15 or 20 users on individual plans. Like we should have some sort of enterprise level contract here, which makes it a lot easier for these AI companies to grow than the traditional top-down sales that enterprise software had to do, where you had to, go in and get approval from 10 different people and then convince the employees to use the product.
Yeah.
Versus this bottoms-up adoption that we're seeing with a lot of these freemium AI products that start in consumer feels very cool and unique.
Yeah. And that in turn supports more consumer growth because then someone on a team will adopt it because their other team member had it, and then they'll bring it home and use it for a project, and it'll spread to their friends and their kids. And I expect we'll continue to see more prosumer enterprise representation on this consumer AI list.
So this, as you've mentioned, is the 5th edition of the list. I'm curious, reflecting back on all of the past editions, what are your biggest takeaways, and do you have any hot takes or predictions for what we're going to see in the next few lists?
Yeah, I would say looking at the list now and then looking back, I really can appreciate now that the first list or two was total chaos in the sense of half the list was new every time, if not more.
And the traffic was fluctuating so wildly.
Yes.
Every month we often got, and there's often, like a 2-week to 1 month delay between when the data happens and when we get it through the data sources. And so founders would be contacting us angry, like, hey, I'm actually ahead of this other property now. I should be number 2 instead of number 5, just because the data sources had a little bit of a lag and things were so volatile back then.
Things were changing so rapidly. I would say as you said, Companionship and general LLM assistance,
Yeah.
like ChatGPT, and then creative tools were kind of the 3 categories that were
Yes.
working 2 years ago. And anything else that popped up on the list, in many cases, was pretty random and would spike one month and be gone the next month.
Right.
I would say we've had a lot of stabilization since then. By the 3rd edition of the list, we started seeing things that weren't just image and text.
Yeah.
We started seeing video, we started seeing music, which was really exciting.
Right.
The 4th and 5th editions of the list, we still have some breakouts, but we're also, starting to see the list kind of normalize.
Right.
I
You
would
said
say.
11 new on the web for this time versus 17 last time.
Yes, exactly. So even list over list. And both like the newcomers there's fewer newcomers.
Mhm.
There's a clear list of all-stars. And the
Right.
newcomers that we are seeing are kind of clustered around many of the same themes like Vibecoding and Companionship
Right.
on this edition of the list.
I'm kind of bought into this All-Stars concept now. Like, we should maybe make jerseys for it or
I
something.
know. And I'm very
proud of them.
I hope that they are proud of themselves. And I hope
Yes.
that they're rooting for themselves.
should
to
send
remain
them,
on the
like,
list.
trophies or
We
something.
should. We absolutely should. I would say when I'm looking for the next 5 lists, there's a couple things that I have top of mind.
Yeah.
Our partner Anish wrote an article about how AI products are kind of verticalizing, even within these general products. Like you'll go use Gemini for one thing and Claude for one thing and ChatGPT for another thing, Perplexity for another thing.
Yeah.
I would expect that to continue. We're not seeing that this is necessarily a race that ChatGPT is running away with, especially on mobile. People have lots of different use cases.
Right.
Grok, we didn't talk about Grok yet,
Yeah.
but they had a big debut on both the web and the mobile list this time around, which was super exciting.
They popped up near the end of the period.
Exactly.
Right? In terms of when, like, Grok for the companions and the image and video, I imagine is what drove a lot of the growth in the Grok app.
Exactly. Yeah. And Grok debuted actually in the top 5 at number 4 on the web list.
Wow.
Which is
On the web list?
Yeah, which is pretty surprising and
That's
exciting for them.
incredible.
We also saw Meta AI start to make a little bit of a dent this time around.
Huh.
Not on the mobile list, but on the web list
They
as
have
well.
a web. I should look into
Yeah,
this.
exactly. So we're still seeing, I think, things heat up, even in this space where you might guess that ChatGPT has kind of run away with it.
For sure.
I would say the other thing I'm expecting to see in the next 2 lists in particular,
Yeah.
on the other end of the spectrum from creative tools where hallucinations are the feature,
Yeah.
there's like productivity prosumer tools where hallucinations are a real problem.
Right.
So these are things that can make spreadsheets, slide decks for you, build financial models, answer
Yes.
emails. We're finally seeing both model reliability and kind of workflow and UI get to a point where these products are exploding in revenue, and I think they're going to explode in usage as well.
For sure.
So I'm excited to see more in the prosumer product category on the next version of the list. Manus made it this time.
Yeah.
Perplexity Comet as its own domain, I would expect might make it. GenSpark is another one that I might expect to see on future versions of the list.
I think one really interesting thing that people sometimes don't realize about more of these professional-ish use cases, like, financial modeling, like you mentioned, or coming up with a presentation or, doing a formal pitch or doc or whatever, is all of the evolution that we're seeing on the foundation model side, like, Grok 4, the new version of Claude, GPT-5, like, those aren't just sort of in their bubble on the side and then the app layer is separate. A lot of these applications are powered by all of those models. So as those models get better at things like math and logic and reasoning, they have less issues with hallucinations. Like, that naturally supercharges all of these products that are in the kind of productivity, prosumer, accuracy is important space.
Exactly.
And I imagine we'll reach a point where it tips them over from like, oh, this was cool, but it was inaccurate too much of the time, so I can't really use it, to like, oh, this is now good enough that like it can do a lot of stuff for me and I am willing to use it.
Yeah, I think that's a great example. Even things like GPT-5 release being very good at consumer health questions.
Yes.
We might expect to see a wave of new and more reliable consumer health products on web or mobile on the next version of the list.
Yeah, I was thinking about what categories we didn't see a lot of that we might expect to see in the future.
More ed tech, I think.
For sure, because edtech is another one where it's important to not have a ton of hallucinations.
Personal finance is one where we haven't seen a lot on either web or mobile, but I expect to see a bunch more on mobile since it's such a big category there.
Social.
Yep.
I think there's been a lot of people wondering when are we going to see the first big AI native social platform, which some could argue is now Facebook, which has largely been taken over by boomer AI images. But I personally think there's going to be at least one, probably multiple separate ones. And honestly, Grok is sort of kind of making a case there and being a social platform. I think health is a great example, a great category, or some of these more structured coaching, therapy, wellness types of things that I think a lot of people use ChatGPT for today, but probably deserve to exist in separate products that will hopefully make the list in the future.
Yeah, I agree. My biggest takeaway actually from every version of the list is that, as with everything else in consumer, there's so much randomness. And if we were able to perfectly predict the next great consumer product, there'd be, hundreds of people out there building it. So just like Vibecoding 9 months ago was a completely unexpected category to pop up on the list, I'm sure there will be one or two more in the next few editions, which is really exciting to think about.
Amazing. So we got to stay tuned for the 6th edition, it sounds like.
Exactly. Click through to check out the full version of the list, which is out now. We'd also love to hear in the comments what your favorite product or company is that made the list this time.
Or if you have any products you use all the time that you were shocked to find did not make the list, we'd particularly love to hear about those.
And we'll see you in 6 months for the next one.